Hello, everyone, and welcome to BlueVen's webinar, Intervening in the Customer Journey. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. My name is Andrew Smith, and I'm Key Account Director here at BlueVen. Shortly, I'll hand you over to Jim Kelly, who is our Principal Consultant, and he will take you through the presentation. A couple of housekeeping items. First, if you haven't attended any of our webinars before, you should know that you can ask questions throughout the presentation utilizing the BrightTalk software. There's a box that you should be able to see on your screen, so please feel free to ask anytime, and we'll get to them at the end. It's also important to know that we're recording the broadcast, and you will be emailed a link to the recording and any resources within the next 24 hours or so. So keep an eye out for that in your email box. So with that, we hope you enjoy the presentations, and without further ado, I pass you over to Jim Kelly. Jim?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Andrew. Hopefully you can hear me just fine. Everything's all right?
I can hear you fine, yep.
Great, okay. So this webinar, we thought we'd really focus on the customer journey and what that transition means, and predominantly we work in a world still where we are working around the concept of multi-channel campaigns. So what we thought we'd do was we would put together a webinar which explains the difference between campaigns and multi-channel campaigns, and what a true customer journey is. And we'd also go a little bit further and hopefully help you to understand how you intervene in that customer journey. So the topics we're going to be covering today really skim the surface of the entire subject of what is a customer journey and how does it work and how do we get involved in it and how do we interact. Also, what are the benefits around doing so? So at a really high level, I'm going to briefly do an overview of, from purely my own opinion, what is the difference between a campaign and a journey? How do we understand the customer journey? How do we map that? And we'll be going through an example, which I've chosen as an example I'm sure we've all been through. And then we're going to talk specifically around how we intervene in that, how we map our product and our tools and our culture and our processes around the customer journey, and how we intervene appropriately whilst being able to measure the impact of what we're trying to do, because it is a different way of thinking. It's a different way of approaching customer communications. And as we know, marketing communications do serve a wide range of purposes. They cover an incredible range and multitude of objectives, but essentially they're all about reaching out to the customers or prospective customers in some way. We all know that marcoms can be used for anything from increasing sales of a product to managing the public perception of a brand, or even minimizing the impact of negative news. It is, however, only prudent that we narrow down our discussion around one particular area. So here we're going to be talking predominantly around managing the customer relationship part of the customer journey, which I know it's something that a lot of people are genuinely talking about, and it's something which I encounter quite often with my clients. So campaign versus journey. Campaign. What is a campaign first? Just so that we all have some common language. My language might be different than yours. This is purely from my opinion. But essentially, campaigns are used predominantly to promote a product, service, or an idea through different media, including television, radio, print, and of course, digital platforms. We take our message, represented by the little red speech bubble at the top there, and our possible audience, which is the yellow block you've got at the bottom. And campaigns typically, but not always, have a fixed audience when they begin. We decide to target a specific subset of our customers with a specific message. We make a selection of customers, which is the green area, and we inject that into our campaign as the audience that we're going to deliver the message or messages to. It's this audience that we communicate to through one or more specific channels. which in turn defines the media that we use. And which channel you choose might be limited by your business or whether you're B2B, B2C, what's available to you. There's a whole host of different reasons. But essentially, we tend to choose a channel. Of course, the creation of the media and the execution itself incurs a cost. That forms the basis of our campaign cost. And campaigns typically have a start date and they have an end date. The start date is the date at which the first outbound communication begins, and an end date, which in this example is on the right-hand side, which could signify a number of things. It could be the last date that you execute a communication through, but more typically, it's the last date that any responses can be attributed to the campaign. Regarding campaigns having a start and end date, by the way, I know that we've all spent many years deploying multi-phase or multi-channel and multi-wave campaigns, but they are essentially repetitions of the same campaign concept. So even multi-phase campaigns do tend to follow repetitions of this approach. Each recipient that we contact that responds to our message brings with it a response. The value of each response can be attributed to the campaign itself. And as, of course, more recipients respond, we build up our respondents and we build up the value incrementally through the lifetime of the campaign. A campaign can, of course, be single channel or more frequently, that we've seen over the last few years, multi-channel, where we may have the ability to contact a customer through several channels, or more often than not, we cannot speak to all of our customers through the same channel. So we build multi-channel campaigns to handle that. Certainly though, and in my opinion without doubt, a campaign tends to have a single objective more often than not. For example, you might be sending a newsletter, upselling a product, reactivating a customer, or notifying the customer of a compelling special offer. Even though as marketeers, we can and do create multi-step campaigns to handle multiple interactions, when you think about it, most of these multiple interactions are still working towards the same objective. So typically you might have a welcome campaign, an acquisition campaign, reactivation campaign. They have a single objective more often than not. The focus with a campaign approach is on what you want the customer to do. Campaigns tend to be quite binary in that the customer receives and acts upon the message you deliver or they don't. Campaigns focus on the destination. Journeys, on the other hand, they tend to focus on the voyage itself that the customer is on. The various interactions and experiences that a customer is exposed to during the voyage is what you're trying to shape, control, or interact with. Journeys can have the ultimate goal of promoting a product or a service similar to a campaign, but they focus more upon the various interactions during the experience, and less so on the end goal. Real customer journeys don't have a start and end date, though. They are perpetually on. They're constantly monitoring customer attributes and behaviors to ascertain who should enter and who should exit the journey. In effect, and perhaps most importantly, the customer decides when they start the journey, not to the marketeer. We can send them something, we can incite them to join that journey, but ultimately it's their decision. Audiences, for that matter, are also different when we're talking about journeys. A customer could be at any point in the journey at any time, so the audience is not fixed. The rules which govern who can enter the journey and who can leave it are fixed, however, and therefore we tend to build a journey audience in a slightly different way. But the approach is the same, but the outcome is different. Journey audiences tend to be more fluid, they're more inclusive, whereas a campaign is more exclusive. Although it's important to know that you can design a journey to behave exactly like an existing campaign you have, if you need to, they can have a start date and an end date, and they can have a single objective to promote a product, a service, or idea. These simple journeys are about taking a customer through a single objective conversation. But they can also offer you the ability to navigate the customer journey through all the other possible interactions that might occur whilst engaged in that single objective conversation. Simple journeys do focus on the destination, less so on the voyage. Also, when you think of channels for a campaign, you might choose your channel. With a journey, you don't tend to think that way. Thinking of channels in an isolated way is very different when we talk about customer journeys. The focus is not on the channel as the source of the conversation, but more as a method to continue or influence the conversation itself. The conversation can continue through any channel at any time, and that's quite key. If you email me, I might go to social media. If you send me a direct mail piece, I might phone you up. My response mechanism is down to my decision in a much more agile, fluid way than ever before. So the conversation which does continue at any time through any channel, it's the customer that chooses the most appropriate channel for what they're trying to achieve. Customers, of course, don't think in terms of channels, and this is an intrinsic difference. Like we do as marketeers anyway, they think solely in terms of contact. The concept of being able to engage a customer in a proper conversation, irrespective of what channel or media is being used by the customer, is of course the very foundation of an omni-channel concept. It might be a phrase that you've heard in the last couple of years, omni-channel, and what that means and how that affects us. Multi-channel is when you are delivering a message through a number of channels. Omni-channel is when the channel is irrelevant. It's the conversation or the experience that is the focus. So journeys, essentially, they tend to be omni-channel from the ground up and embrace a number of different channels. So although there are several differences between channels, between campaigns, and journeys, the differences, in my opinion, are that one, a campaign is typically designed to achieve a single objective. Journeys are designed to handle an entire end-to-end customer-led experience. Journeys focus on the voyage, campaigns focus on the destination itself. Secondly, campaigns tend to have a fixed time period within which they operate. This originates, I think, from the days of direct mail and having to match back responses against transactions, effectively giving us a timeline to measure the campaign performance. Third, campaigns are linear. Journeys are not. Even if you incorporate multi-channel, multi-phase, and multi-step tactics and facets into a campaign is still linear by design. So, as an overview of the difference between campaign and journey, I hope that helps to position kind of where we are. So let's now step into understanding the customer journey and starting to understand and plot out what that means, how we plot it, how we plan it, and how we begin to understand it. A customer journey is defined and articulated most appropriately by a map. Now, this is an example that I'm going to talk you through. A customer journey map does tell a story of the customer experience from the initial interaction through a series of additional interactions until the customer leaves that journey through a decisive and unambiguous outcome. Although you can map the entire customer experience if you're feeling brave, I'd suggest breaking the entire experience that you have with your customer base into much more focused stories, starting with the simple, most common customer experiences like purchasing or making a complaint or something like that, and working from there. You will find that when your journeys overlap, you'll be more prepared to understand the interactions between individual journeys. So I've just chosen a real simple example of a customer experience in order to articulate what I mean. This is my journey. This is one of my journeys about 2-3 days ago. So I have a business trip coming up. And it's a long haul. I'm going to the US for quite a few weeks, and there are a couple of my travel accessories that I normally carry around with me wherever I go that took a bit of a pounding on my last trip. So I know I need to replace some. So late in the evening, a few days ago, I jumped onto my go-to online retailer. With your customer journeys, however, you decide to map them. It just doesn't matter how. Start by identifying the experiences, as I have done across the top there, preferably through the use of the customer's perspective. So as you can see at the top there, the business trip was soon. I need to replace my travel accessories. I search for specific products, etc., etc. Try to think about what the customers in your world are doing and why they're doing it, as I have here. It's also a good idea to add third-party interactions as well as those that your organization is directly involved in. For example, if you believe your customer would ask their friends and family or a colleague for advice as part of a journey, whether you're B2C or B2B, even though you aren't directly involved in that interaction, it's a good idea to add it to the map for reasons that will become intrinsically clear later. There is no hard and fast rule here on the order in which you approach this, but I like to add how the customer might be feeling at each of these interaction points. I call this their personal feeling. It's not about how the customer is feeling towards the experience of the brand itself or towards the vendor or your organization. It's just how they're feeling at that point in the journey. This really helps to add clarity and to actually teach a reader that is not you more about the customer experience. For each of the individual touch points, add some context about the customer's feelings and motivations for each of these touch points. It's incredibly important that you represent this contextually from the customer's perspective. So, as you can see here, we have this kind of smooth line graph going across, which is my personal feeling. I always, whenever I'm plotting these on behalf of a customer or I'm talking with my clients and we're going through this process, I always start the personal feeling part at a 5, which is the midpoint. The scale, by the way, is 1 to 10, with 1 being the most negative and 10 being the most happy, which would be at the top of the graph when engaging in this journey. But as I say, the personal feeling enters at a 0.5 unless I know the customer is particularly unhappy or happy when engaging on this particular journey. So I'll just start them as a 5, assuming that all people enter as a midpoint in their world. So additionally, I would say, when you add these points about how the customer is experiencing the journey itself, do feel free to add any note or context that helps you to explain what the customer is doing and how they are engaging. This, a little red circle, by the way, is me refining my basket contents after a particularly self-indulgent round of window shopping after the shock of seeing what I put in my basket. So you can see how my mood increased because I found the product I was looking for, perhaps. I was excited by the related products that were offered to me. I engaged in this impulse shopping, where you kind of just add things that you never thought you might ever possibly need into your basket. And then I looked at my basket and started to concern myself with the future of my children's education, being able to pay for it, had to take some stuff out. Eventually made the commitment to actually make the purchase. Put yourself in the customer's mindset. Try to think about the experience you're delivering to them and how are they feeling when they interact with your channels, touch points, and your content. This is their affinity towards your organization, the vendor or the supplier. This, of course, is very subjective, but do try to be honest. A little more later on how you can best get this information. So the vendor affinity that you can see at the bottom is incredibly important because it's how they're feeling about your brand, about your organization, about the actual experience they're going through, not how they're feeling personally. Just to highlight that, I feel particularly excited when I put a product in a basket. It makes me feel kind of good. But when I look at the price, that might not annoy me, but it certainly won't make me feel great towards the brand if I think they're overcharging me. It's a very simplistic example, but when we start to add additional information on here, you can see how from the vendor's organizational perspective, the customer experience is varying throughout the journey itself. It's a very simplistic example, as I say, but it's an approach that will work for any business in any vertical. The key is to represent the customer's experience in this journey. A customer journey map can be incredibly helpful. They act as visual aids for not only marketeers, but they also offer a very concise and neat representation of a customer experience that every team in an organization can understand and relate to. Your customer journey maps can take any form you like, and you can use anything from PowerPoint or Visio or even paper and pencil to draw it on. I would, however, just want to point out that too many customer journey maps that I've seen are designed to be presented on a screen. And screens are kind of limiting, as you can see from this. They're limiting as to how big or how explorative I can get. Personally, I prefer having a big piece of paper and being able to actually pore over it like a real map. So it's imperative that you approach your customer journey mapping in a very similar way. You need to understand the customer experience before you can identify how you can truly get involved in it. But typically a map, no matter how you do it, appears as some type of infographic. Whatever its form, the goal is the same. You want to capture and teach your organization more about the customers, their experience, and their motivation. So just to recap about how you map your customer journey, which is step one on this process of intervening in it. Try to tell the story from the customer's perspective. Really focusing on the customer experience is only valid if you do it from the customer's perspective. It can, and probably will, include experiences outside of your control, third-party conversations, friends and family, colleagues, and even social media interactions. Represent multiple customer personas. Not all of your customers are the same. They'll have different lifestyles, approaches, and motivations. It's really down to you how you tap into those individual personas and how you get a feel for how they interact in your chosen journey. If you do have existing customer segmentation, use those as a starting point for your research. If you don't, it may help to use qualitative research to help you identify the customer segments first. Number 3 is about emotions and affinity. Try to focus on the emotions and the affinity. It doesn't matter whether your business is B2C or B2B. The emotions your customers go through in any given journey are incredibly important to understand if you're going to be able to tap into them. What they're feeling and how they're responding are intrinsically connected. Break complex journeys into phases. Some journeys will just be too unwieldy to be able to create a single customer journey map for. Breaking them into phases allows you to concentrate on the relevant detail for each phase without obliterating the clarity of the map itself. You may find this particularly useful if you're in a B2B industry where a very complex sales cycle is your world. That sales cycle might span multiple journey phases. Lead nurturing, for example, is one of the more robust examples of a journey phase that I would recommend you focus on rather than the entire experience. And lastly, but by no means least, and potentially the most important one, with the best will in the world, you won't be able to create a really accurate customer journey map if you solely rely upon internal staff to describe the journey and or the customer experience. It's a good start point, but qualitative research like talking to customers, interviewing them, focus groups and the like are incredibly valuable in this process. Subsequent use of quantitative research to fill gaps, confirm results, and identify some key interaction metrics will round off your map beautifully and will provide a real foundation for measurable intervention. So understanding and mapping out the customer interaction journey is a key part of being able to intervene in it. But now, assuming that you are going through that process and you're there, we're going to talk about intervening in that customer journey. So once a story is laid out, we can articulate it to any interested party. We're just going to go back here to our map example. Excuse me. We can start thinking about how we can plot the interaction touch points on the customer journey. Now, these are incredibly important because these are the point at which the customer and you touch. Interaction points are more than just touch points, though. They're opportunities to get involved. They're opportunities to intervene. For me, on my journey, I went straight to the website. I could have entered the same journey if I wanted to do so in any number of different ways, however, by clicking on a link in an email, for example. And when you're going through this process for your customer journeys, do try to remember that the various entry points a customer might take will and might be different for every customer persona you have. Remember, they instigate the journey, not marketeers. We can prompt them to, with attractive offers, advertisements, and great content, but ultimately it's the customer that chooses to start the journey or not. Just as a throwaway, you have to map all those entry points. In my case, however, I knew exactly what I was looking for, and I was able to very quickly find it with minimal effort. I spent a few minutes looking at prices, and I even read a couple of reviews. So I had some other touch points that I was getting involved in. I may have clicked on a few similar products, but ultimately, I made my decision and I placed the product that I wanted into my basket. It was at this point that this organization engaged me in a tremendously powerful way. The product recommendation area of the screen that I was presented with started me off on an impulse shopping experience, which I iteratively went through in order to add more and more products into my basket. Checking the basket did throw me into a mild state of panic, and I started to remove products and refine my selections. Of course, there will be many customers that went through the actual journey that I went through, and I myself have done this several times when I haven't been drawn into an impulse shopping moment and I've just merely gone straight to basket, happy with the selection that I've made. So either way, I placed my order and subsequently having the email confirmation delivered, I had new recommendations based on what I've just bought. As I said earlier, personally, I wasn't particularly enamored with the recommendations that I was sent. I didn't think they were relevant, and I didn't think they were inspiring. In fact, if you've seen any of my other webinars which talk about the difference between intelligence versus wisdom, you'll understand why I wasn't particularly enamored with those recommendations. They were not things that I would normally attach to what I'd bought, they were actually products which were too similar to what I'd bought. They were not any decent, exciting, inspiring recommendations in there. So I wasn't particularly chuffed with that. But I could have responded in a different way. However, if I liked the recommendations and clicked on one, I could have then started the entire journey all over again. So this is what I mean by not having to leave a journey until a really clear, unambiguous decision is made by the customer. They decide when they enter, they decide when they leave. A word of warning, though, about mapping interaction touchpoints. It's very easy to put the whole journey into a linear flowchart like this and convince yourself that you have more control over the experience than you actually do. Just mapping the interaction points like this is not the same as the customer journey map on the previous slide. The actual customer journey map lays out the land, it lays out the terrain of the voyage. It helps you view the journey the customer is on holistically and from their perspective. This view, the interaction touch points that we're looking at, is to help you understand where, if at all, you can intervene in that voyage. Think of it as points in the journey where you have an opportunity to interact with the customer. In an absolute isolation, this linear approach can be severely limiting to how you think about your customer experience. So my advice is do both. Tell the story of the customer voyage, but identify where you can get involved in it too. I'd just like to clarify something before we go any further. I know the word intervention can have some negative connotations. Things like interference or strong action spring to mind. But when I use the word intervention in this context, there is a specific definition that I have in mind. It is to intentionally become involved in a difficult situation to prevent it from getting worse, preferably improving it. Essentially, the biggest impact can be gained when you're intervening in a customer journey by getting involved in negative or potentially negative experiences and turning them into positive ones. You will naturally use your intervention abilities to get involved in the good experiences too, and I would encourage you to do so, improving them even further, I'm sure, but the low-hanging fruit is improving the negative experiences first. Absolutely and definitively use your capabilities to get involved in any part of any journey you want, but negative experiences are easy pickings. In the example of my journey, although the price was high for the product that I wanted, the site quickly showed me alternative products, very similar products, and in an easy, readable format that allowed me to make a more informed decision. After my incredibly self-indulgent window shopping spree, having realized I'd gone a bit too far, I could easily remove products out of the basket. There was no multi-step, convoluted, confirm this, that, and the other process. I just clicked it. I clicked what I wanted, and it was gone. And although I was less than impressed with the product recommendations I received post-sale, I could refine my own recommendations if I wanted to, giving the website even more information to help it improve my experience further. The best customer experiences that I've had with any organization has been where the good has gone well and the bad has been handled well. It is, after all, easier to improve a bad experience than to improve a good one. But try to think about your business. In the hotel and leisure industry, for example, handling a bad experience that a customer has within the hotel is critical to getting the customer to return. In any B2B service-led industry with a very complex sales process, if a valued customer has a bad experience, it's escalated internally to someone who can deal with it appropriately, preventing the situation from getting worse. And certainly within personal finance, If a customer is behind on payments on a credit card, for example, the best companies who do this don't wait until the payments mount up. They intervene. They actually contact the customer and they improve the situation. Intelligently intervening in the customer journey is not about increasing open rate, reducing attrition, or increasing the average basket value. It's about fundamentally improving the customer experience, making the customer more loyal, more likely to purchase, and improving the most uncontrollable and yet most powerful marketing channel that I know of, which is the voice of the customer. So, as I mentioned earlier, although the principles of intervention can be applied to any element of any customer journey, and you certainly should, the low-hanging fruit is affecting a negative experience. So personally, I'd go after those first. Identify where you can get involved and how you can intervene. They're not the hardest ones to spot, but they also tend to have the biggest effect overall on the customer experience and value. Don't forget there may be some negative experiences that you cannot improve. You'll just have to accept those and just move on to other elements. When we get attached to a particular channel, there's a drive to engage the customer through that channel more often, perhaps too often. The approach that we described at the start of the presentation, where we're talking about campaigns, which is channel focused, although the actual development and understanding of your customer journey maps, if you act in terms of a single channel, it's detrimental to what you're trying to achieve. If you're going to engage the customer in a real conversation as part of their voyage, expand your options. You might want to email me, sure, but there are 100 other channels that you could potentially engage me through, and I could potentially engage you through. If you do have real-time options open, use these wherever you can. That's real intervention. Try to appeal to the feeling that the customer is experiencing. Certainly try to avoid reinforcing the negative experience they're having. Empathize with them. Don't emphasize the problem. I know it might sound obvious, but having an email subject line arrive in my inbox after a bad experience that starts with, "I'm sorry you're having a bad time," just reinforces what I already know to be true. It's a bad experience. Try to think about my motivation and what you might say to me or show me if I were stood right next to you in your office. Importantly, try to develop a measurable intervention if you can. I'll explore this in a little more detail in a minute, but essentially knowing that you've improved the customer journey retention by 10% is great. But actually knowing where in the journey and how you did it are incredibly valuable if you're going to iteratively improve the customer experience. And it goes without saying, no matter what engagement you have with a customer, don't over-personalize. It can get incredibly creepy. So when you're using intervention techniques, we can also move those into intervention for testing. We've talked about how we plot the intervention touch points and how we can touch those and different effects when we're really thinking in an omnichannel way. But using intervention techniques is incredibly effective for testing purposes too. It really is about being able to tap somebody on the shoulder at the point of making a decision and whispering something pretty cool in their ear. Have you thought about this? What if you look at it that way? Real-time capable channels are obviously a must-have for the biggest benefits to be realized. But any type of message personalization should be measurable, providing you've mapped the customer journey properly. Take, for example, a really simple email link. As your customer, I've opened the email and clicked the link, but this journey, we've applied some testing. You've randomly split customers using an 80-20 rule to send your customers, and me included, off on a different experience. The champion, which is the 80% element, is to deploy variant content based upon the device type that the customer is using. Of course, you normally deploy responsive design wherever you can anyway, but in this case, the actual experience is fundamentally different. The alternative route, which is our challenger, splits the visitors based upon a metric. You could use any metric you have access to for the entire customer. Life stage metrics such as age, number of children, number of employees if they're in a B2B context, for example. Or you could use monetary metrics such as revenue, average basket value, of recency and or frequency. Of course, if you're so inclined and your organization has the capability, you may even want to split on a predictive model or some such element. No matter what your approach, the opportunity for you to inject a test-style journey into your intervention is a powerful and yet fluid way to actually test customer behavior and responsiveness, as well as affinity to a particular experience. Of course, it's imperative, providing you have the right marketing automation capability and the right tools at your disposal, that you can then merge the customers back together through to continue the rest of the journey so that you don't break the experience and you don't create duplicates during the actual journey itself. You know, customer journeys open up incredible possibilities for testing, not only of a device, a segment, or a metric-based experience, but you can also use different channels across a single journey as we're deploying this entire conversation in a single omni-channel journey approach. So knowing that you've improved a customer journey retention by 10%, as I mentioned earlier, is great, but actually knowing how and where is incredibly important. So measuring the impact is key if you're going to add value across the experience and know how and where you've done it. If you can't measure the intervention monetarily, try to use a metric type approach. This approach has been tried and tested in lead nurturing for B2B organizations around the world for years. It's equally applicable within B2C. It's the principle that if you do X, you earn 10 points. If you do Y, you gain 50 points. If you do Z, you lose 20 points. It's another way of measuring the impact and sometimes can be better than a pure revenue-based measurement. So when you're moving to a customer journey-based approach to managing your customer relationships, there are a few tips that I can offer you to maximize the way in which you monitor and measure that impact across the board. Date stamping every step of the journey is a very similar approach to creating a campaign history entry like we currently do when you're running your marketing communications using traditional, campaigns. Of course, with a traditional campaign management tool, we create that history entry when a customer is sent something. But in this case, for the customer journey, it's a holistic monitoring program that we're trying to actually put in place. So providing you have the right tools at your disposal, you really should be automatically date stamping every single step. We've discussed this a few times, but just to cover that one off, it's important for us to maybe combine, not just use metric or monetary ways of measuring the impact. I don't want you to think you have to choose one. There are times when using both is actually the right answer. And we all know the value of control groups. If you're running your world using traditional campaigns, you will know that they need to be everywhere. Because we use them as a way of creating a benchmark for measuring the campaign performance. Still feel free to use them in a customer journey approach context, but I would strongly recommend you avoid use them during a journey, i.e. in the middle of a journey. The effect of throwing a customer into a control group in the middle of a journey is like breaking off a personal conversation mid-sentence. Don't forget they're already in that journey. They've chosen to be in that journey. A control group just creates a negative experience that you don't want to have. So if you're going to use a control group, use it at the start or at the end of a journey. Try not to use it in the middle. Air traffic control This is a phrase that I particularly like. I encountered it with a marketing director that I'd met several years ago, and he was talking about air traffic control being able to look at a radar and actually see where every airplane is and every helicopter is in your terrain. And the principle is that people's lives cross over regularly. Each person can be on their own journey or the same journey at different stages in it. You need to develop a strategy to monitor the performance across and within journeys. As your customer, I might be in multiple places at any given point in time. So how are you affecting me? What are you doing? How are you treating me? How are you interacting with me? So just to wrap it up, I've put the top 5 tips that I have on the left-hand side, being able to map your customer journey and understand it. And on the right-hand side, being able to intervene in the customer journey and being able to measure the impact of what you're doing. I really hope you've enjoyed the last 45 minutes. I've enjoyed talking to you. If you are interested or intrigued to know more on how we deploy this with our clients, and we help them get there through data, technology, process, procedure, and individual culture, I'd be more than happy to have a chat with any one of you. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand back to Andrew, and hopefully we've got some questions.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much, Jim. And just for everyone's edification, that concludes the presentation portion of the webinar. We will be answering a few questions. In the interest of time, we'll be brief. We hope that you found the presentation beneficial, and as a reminder, you will be receiving a link to a recording of the presentation by email soon. So for those of you who may have entered late, you will be able to have the opportunity to catch up on anything that you missed. So at this point, we're ready to answer some questions. A thank you to anyone who has submitted a question, and if you haven't, there's still time. You can use the BrightTalk software and enter anything. And any questions that we don't manage to get to live, we will be answering them directly via email after the webinar. So bear with me just a moment. First question is, can you intervene in the customer journey even on social platforms, for example, on Instagram?
Wow. Okay. Yes is the short answer. Not so much so with Instagram, though, is the rest of that answer. There is no individual channel that you cannot include within your customer journey, even if you're just trying to monitor your customer's interaction of that channel. So you may not be able to directly interact with your customers on Instagram. That equally applies to Twitter and Facebook, things like that. So for example, you can't send me a direct tweet unless I am following you. But if you tweet publicly and I'm interested in your brand, I'm going to see it anyway. So the question is not about whether you can contact a customer through that channel, it's whether they are engaged in that channel as part of your experience. So, to cut a long story short, it is a part of your customer journey if the customer uses it as part of the experience. Hopefully that answers.
That's great, Jim. Another question, this is a little bit vague. Maybe you'll get the full context of it, but how far do you see real-time content going in the future? I guess it could be unlimited, but how far do what do you think is practical in the near future, I guess?
Wow, I'm dead excited by what the real-time opportunities are. I'm not sure, Andrew, if you personally have heard about iBeacon and things like that, products which are making
Absolutely,
their way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tremendously exciting opportunities for marketeers and store owners for offline and online data being brought together in a real-time way, being able to interact with a customer experience when they walk in the store, when they reach a certain area. That, of course, applies predominantly to retail. That's dead exciting. But also when you think about other industries too. So the way in which we as consumers interact with data, interact with information, whether it be through news media publishing or specific articles that we read, whether we're doing Google searches or whatever, real-time data is becoming the norm. So being able to intervene at real time is incredibly important. If your marketing platform isn't yet at that point, you might want to think about, well, actually, what impact will this have upon your business within 6, 12, 18 months' time? I personally believe that the opportunities for real-time data are already there. It's just marketeers are starting to catch up to the opportunities and the real value being added to being able to intervene at real time, which is why we're particularly excited with the clients that we're working with.
Great. Thanks, Jim. One more, again, in the interest of time. How long would the planning phase take to be able to use personalization and smart content to intervene in this way when you could potentially have hundreds, thousands, or even millions of potential permutations?
Right. So the complexities of your customer journeys are entirely down to how you plan them. I certainly wouldn't advocate if you take the entire customer experience that you have, no matter what business you're in, everything from when you first say hello to when you last say goodbye, and plan it in one big journey. I would strongly recommend that you adopt an approach where you identify where a journey is relevant and a traditional campaign is relevant. Over time, you will start to transfer more campaigns into journeys, and your marketing ecosystem will really take on a more holistic customer journey type approach. But I certainly wouldn't advocate doing a big project. I would choose 1, 2, or 3 simple, important journeys and expand upon those. Does that answer the question, Andrew? Hopefully.
I think so. I think it's great advice, and I think with that we'll end the questioning, and hopefully this has been helpful for everyone. If anyone would like to know more about BlueVenn and how we could help benefit your organization, feel free to send us an email. We also have a telephone number there on the screen, and would love to hear from you. To hear about what industry leaders are using BlueVenn services, we have a range of different case studies and a list of upcoming webinars at bluevenn.com. Lastly, if you found the presentation useful, you can head over to LinkedIn and Twitter and give us a follow on each of those. And we are regularly posting helpful marketing ebooks as well as our weekly blog. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar. That's all from us today. Have a great day and goodbye.